Welcome to Scary Stories Night. Get ready for chilling tales that haunt your nights. Tell us in the comments where and when you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for more horror. Now, lights off. Let's begin. On a quiet night, three friends decided to go on a camping trip in a forest known for its beauty and tranquility. After a day full of adventures and exploring nature, they set up their tent near a small river and lit a fire to stay warm and cook dinner. As the night progressed, the sounds of the forest gradually faded until an eerie silence settled in. Suddenly, a powerful roar echoed through the area. Their blood ran cold as they exchanged anxious glances. They tried to convince themselves that the sound was distant, but the roar came again, this time much closer. The friends realized they were facing a lion roaming the area. Heavy footsteps approached their tent, and large shadows flickered on the tent walls. Fear gripped them, and they didn't know what to do. One suggested putting out the fire and hiding, while others thought staying outside might be safer. In those critical moments, they remembered advice they had read. If you encounter a lion, don't run or turn your back. Stay calm and back away slowly. Summoning their courage, they slowly stepped out of the tent, maintaining their composure as they began to retreat without turning around. The lion watched them with glowing eyes, but did not attack. They continued backing away until the lion disappeared into the darkness. After hours of walking, they reached a safe area where they managed to contact authorities who helped them. The friends learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of camping in wildlife areas without proper precautions. They decided to share their story to warn others of potential risks and emphasize the importance of preparation when camping in the wild. The Cursed Encounter. As I lay in bed one night, attempting to find a comfortable position, I shifted to stretch my legs. Unexpectedly, my feet brushed against something at the foot of my bed. What could it be? I wondered briefly, but dismissed the thought. With my right arm fractured in an accident, investigating was out of the question. I struggled to adjust myself with the support of pillows, unable to do much beyond lying flat. Suddenly, I felt another touch at my feet, impossible as it seemed. Summoning all my strength, I lifted my head to look down. To my horror, I saw a woman's head staring back at me, her sinister eyes filled with dread. "A ghost," I murmured in disbelief. Her vile smile sent shivers down my spine as she sat on the floor, her head propped at the end of my bed, fixated on me with an unsettling gaze. It was as though she had found a new plaything for the night. The stench of decay emanated from her rotten feet, assaulting my senses. As she noticed my gaze upon her, I felt a chill run down my spine. In that moment, I made a decision to ignore her presence and attempt to return to sleep, despite the unsettling encounter. But it was not up to me to decide whether I could ignore her or not. She pulled my blanket toward her, as if asking for my attention. I didn't resist, letting her do what she wanted, and I dozed off to sleep due to my medications. It was 3 a.m. when I woke up to relieve myself. For an instant, I forgot about the strange encounter. That didn't last long, as when I stepped on the floor to get up, she stood up straight, her eyes still piercing my soul. Jolted, I sat back down on my bed, and so did she beside me. I slowly lay back, trying to ignore the weight of her gaze on me, though the feeling of her eyes piercing into my very soul was unbearable. I closed my eyes, trying to drift into the haze of sleep that my medications promised. But sleep didn't come, not with her sitting there beside me. her presence more suffocating than the darkness of the room. I attempted to pretend it wasn't happening, telling myself that in the morning it would all feel like a strange dream. But then came another movement. Her fingers brushed against my blanket again, cold and clammy, like the hand of death itself. A faint whisper of words I couldn't understand floated through the air. "Help me," she seemed to say. It was soft, distant, yet so clear. The room seemed to contract around me, my chest tightening as though the walls themselves were closing in. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice betrayed me. The words lodged themselves in my throat. My mind screamed in terror, but my body was paralyzed. Suddenly, her hand brushed mine, cold as ice, and I flinched, recoiling instinctively. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold, and then she smiled. A twisted, grotesque smile, as though she found my fear amusing. "You don't remember me, do you?" Her voice was soft, almost mocking, like a whisper in the wind. "But I remember you." I tried to pull away, but my body refused to move. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs as if trying to escape the fear that gripped me. She was no longer sitting on the floor. Now, she was right beside me, her face inches from mine, her rancid breath brushing against my skin. The stench of decay was unbearable, suffocating me, drowning my senses. My mind spun with questions, yet I couldn't form any words. Who was she? Why was she here? Why me? But all I could do was tremble, unable to speak, unable to move. "You have forgotten," she whispered again, her lips curling into that same grotesque smile. "But I haven't." And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. The room was still, silent. The oppressive weight lifted, and for a moment I thought it was over. I dared to look down at my feet, where moments ago her sinister eyes had glared back at me. But nothing was there. No woman, no ghost, just the empty, quiet darkness. I closed my eyes, hoping against hope that it had all been a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion and medication. But deep down, I knew it hadn't been. She was real, and somehow she was waiting for something. I lay still for the rest of the night, frozen under the sheets, praying that when I woke, she would be gone for good. But as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, I heard a whisper again, faint but unmistakable. "I'll be back." I just had my first good Tinder date since my husband passed. "Are you enjoying the salad?" my date asks. "Yes, it's pretty good," I reply, lying. I hate salads, but I have to keep an empty stomach. Tinder dates, or dates in general, aren't easy for a 40-something woman. You wouldn't believe the kind of men who show up. This one seems okay. I ask about his job. "I'm a software engineer," he responds. "Cool," I reply. I know nothing about that. He asks me where I live, and soon the conversation leads to weather, inflation, the Smiths, and even a bit of politics. That's too risky of a topic for a first date, but I feel like we do share a lot in common. "So, you're a widow, right?" he cautiously brings up, referencing my profile description. "Yes, it's been 2 years," I share. "Trying to get out more, maybe move on." "I understand," he confides. "I'm a widower as well. My wife had pancreatic cancer in 18. His face darkens. I see his expression sadden, as if difficult memories resurface. I touch his hand. "My husband died in a hit and run," I explain. "The driver was drunk, coming back from a party or something." He asks if the driver was caught. I nod. "He only got a fine." "That's absurd," he remarks. I agree. We order a creme brulee, my favorite dessert, and he drives me home. I enjoyed tonight, he tells me while parked outside my house. Me too, I admit. It's my first good date since everything. He leans over for a kiss. I hesitate and pull my face back. Sorry, I whisper, tears forming. I'm not sure I'm ready just yet. That's okay, he replies, but I hope you can give me a second date. Yes, that works for sure, I say, smiling at him as I leave the car. At home, I shower, change to something comfy, and head to the basement. As I descend the stairs, the clinking of iron chains and muffled screams grow louder. A naked man is chained to a wall, limb by limb. His body, nearly stripped of skin, reveals a deep red of blood and exposed flesh. His face stiffens in terror as he sees me approach. It's been a long time since I have him down here. Can you believe he thought a fine would be enough to pay for killing my husband? I open the toolbox by the rack. It's so hard to choose. I've tried everything already. I met someone today, I begin to tell him. Maybe it's time for me to move on from what you did. I pick the big pliers. That'll do it. But let's make our last night count, I add with a grin. Thank God I didn't eat much earlier. I'm on a plane. Someone is sitting in the empty seat next to me. No matter how many times I look, it's an empty seat, I swear. Covered in ugly blue and purple upholstery, slightly reclined. Who reclined it? At first, when the cabin doors closed, I thought I had gotten lucky. I had a window seat in a 2-seat row, and no one had shown up to claim the aisle seat to my right. I popped open the window cover and enjoyed the sight of a pink and gold sunset over the waters of the Pacific. Ma'am, please put up your tray table. I looked over to the source of the clipped voice. The aisle seat tray table was down, and a flight attendant was staring at a spot a few inches to the right of my head, a blank, fixed smile on her face. I hesitated for a second before latching the wayward table. The attendant moved on. For your sleeping friend. It was a different attendant this time, a man with kind eyes and curly brown hair. He held out 2 pairs of headphones toward me. I accepted them, and, not sure what else to do, tucked 1 pair in the aisle seat back pocket. I tried to watch a movie, but the idea had dripped into my thoughts now, coloring every one of them with a single absurd question. Who is sitting next to me? I've checked that aisle seat 100 times in the past hour. It's absolutely, positively empty. I'm also absolutely, positively sure someone's sitting in it, because the beverage service went by just now, and that blank-faced female attendant asked my non-existent seatmate, "Can I get you something to drink?" And I heard clearly from the empty air, "No, thank you." Our cat passed away last month, and my wife has not taken it well. My wife and I officially became empty nesters a month ago. Our cat, Tibbs, passed away. He had been part of our family for 15 years. 15 years ago, our daughter Faith passed away on the school bus. She had a heart condition that doctors never noticed. My wife was waiting on the front steps of our porch for the bus like she always did. Instead of seeing our daughter running up the walkway, she got a call that Faith had suffered from cardiac arrest on the bus. Our daughter never woke up. She was 10. My wife was inconsolable for a month. She called me at work and said that she found a way to talk to Faith again. She was losing it. I went to the park to sneak a cigarette, and I saw 2 crackheads laughing and dragging a kitten by a noose made from a shoelace. I beat the shit out of them and took the kitten and brought him home. At first, my wife didn't want to keep him, but he wore her down. For the last 15 years, he's kept my wife happy. I think it simply pushed off the inevitable. My wife hardly talked for a week after Tibbs passed. She sat on the porch all day, but then she was happy again. Too happy. She's asked me lots of questions like, if you could say one thing to Faith, what would it be? She's always worked from home, but she's always taken care of herself like she was going into the office. Not anymore. She even stopped bathing. I had to remind her. I thought she was burning incense to mask the smell she's been giving off. I was wrong. I caught her whispering in her office late at night on several occasions. 3 days ago, I woke up in bed without her. The smell of incense was overpowering. I got out of bed and noticed a broken piece of chalk on the floor by her side. I quietly moved the bed, and she had drawn a circle on the floorboards. A strange design, melted candles, a picture of Faith in the middle of it all. She butt-dialed me yesterday. She was having a conversation. She kept addressing whatever she was talking to as Faith. What I heard in response made the blood freeze in my veins. It sounded like a quiet barking, guttural. My wife kept calling it Faith. I had a ring notification today. It was my wife, sitting on the porch looking down the street. She was talking. You said you were going to let me see you. You promised. Mommy wants to be with you. Okay, I won't look. My wife covered her eyes. Our front door opened behind her. I heard the low barking. It was coming from inside the house. Okay, Mommy's ready. Something unseen pulled her from behind, dragging her back inside. I called the cops. There was no sign of her anywhere. She's gone. Grandma, I don't hate my grandmother. I just don't like her. You know how people say grandmas are loving, warm, and everything good in the world? Well, mine is different. She's my maternal grandma, and if I had to describe her, I'd say she's almost like a witch. Not in the cackling, broomstick-riding way, but in the way she moves, the way she looks at you. It's unnerving. To be fair, she's always been good to us. She baked us cookies, knitted us scarves in the winter, told us bedtime stories. But I'd get these waves of dread around her. Goosebumps. My heart would race for no reason. When we were kids, we spent most of our school holidays at her house. I hated it. Her place was old, creaky, and smelled faintly of earth, like a forest that never saw the sun. The windows were always partially shut, as though she didn't want the world to see inside. But it wasn't just the house. It was her. There were moments, tiny ones, that stuck with me. Like the time I woke up at night and found her standing by my bed, not doing anything, just staring at me. Or the time I saw her feeding scraps to something in the woods behind her house, mumbling in a language I didn't recognize. "Grandma, what are you doing?" I'd asked, my voice shaky. She turned to me slowly, her face completely blank. Then she smiled. "Feeding the crows, dear. Go back inside." But there were no crows. My parents dismissed it. "She's just eccentric," Mom would say. "You kids have overactive imaginations." I tried to believe that, I really did, until last summer. It was my first visit to her house in years. My siblings had moved away, and I thought maybe, as an adult, I'd see her differently. I didn't. If anything, the feeling was worse. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispers, faint, almost melodic. They were coming from the hallway. Against every instinct, I crept out of bed and followed the sound. It led me to the basement door. The whispers stopped the moment I touched the handle. I opened the door. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was pitch black, but I could make out a faint glow from the corner. "Grandma?" I called out. My voice echoed. The glow intensified, and suddenly she was there, sitting in the middle of the room. Her back was to me, and she was holding something. No, someone. A small, shadowy figure. "Grandma, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. She turned slowly, and I swear for a moment her face wasn't hers. It was mine. "Just fixing things," she said, her voice layered with 100 others. I ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the house and halfway down the road. I haven't been back since. Yesterday, my mum called. "Grandma's passed," she said. I should have felt relief, but instead, all I could think about was the last thing she said to me. Just fixing things. And this morning, when I looked in the mirror, my reflection smiled before I did. Today, an unknown person messaged me. "Today is your last day." It was December 31st, New Year's Eve. My friends and I had planned a party at an old mansion on the outskirts of town. As we arrived, the mansion loomed before us, its tall spires and dark windows reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. We laughed and joked as we entered, but the atmosphere inside was eerie. Cobwebs hung from the chandeliers and the air was thick with dust. As we parted, strange things began to happen. Doors creaked open and shut, and the sound of footsteps echoed down the halls. At midnight, we gathered to count down to the new year. But as the clock struck 12, the lights flickered and died. We were plunged into darkness, surrounded by an oppressive silence. And then we heard it. A low, menacing whisper that seemed to come from all around us. "Happy New Year, to eternity." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. But something was horribly wrong. My friends' faces were twisted and grotesque, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I tried to run, but my feet were frozen to the spot. And then I saw it. A figure, tall and imposing, standing behind my friends. It reached out a bony hand and touched my face. I felt a chill run down my spine, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was alone in the mansion. The party was over, and the new year had begun. But as I stumbled out into the bright sunlight, I realized that something was terribly wrong. The world outside was different. The buildings seemed taller and twisted. The people passing by were faceless and gray. I stumbled through the streets, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then I saw it. A giant clock tower looming above the city, its face twisted into a grotesque grin. The whisper seemed to echo in my mind again. "Happy New Year, to eternity." I realized that I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, reliving the same New Year's Eve over and over. And as the clock struck 12 again, I screamed. The place that grants wishes on New Year. There are places all over the world where if you happen to make a wish at the right time, it will come true. Nick stumbled into one of these places last New Year, just outside the back door of a seedy old downtown disco, and happened to wish, from the bottom of his heart, that Camilla would fall in love with him. It was pure coincidence. They went on their first date the next week. By February, she had moved in, breaking her lease to do so. Nick had been delirious with joy. A year had passed, and he was at the same disco again. He looked at Camilla's beautiful face, lit up by the flashing disco lights. She gripped his arm. "Nick, it's almost midnight." He hesitated, and she frowned. "You promised me," she yelled in the thumping music. They started walking towards the back entrance, his heart flopping about in his chest with misery. Foolishly, he had told her about the wish just a few months ago. Camilla didn't deny or withdraw her love. It was too strong. but she became insistent and she made Nick promise to take her there this new year. She wanted a wish too. Nick tried to cajole her into telling him what her wish was, but she wouldn't. And she was so sweet and loving that he gave up, melting into the bliss of being loved by her. "Camilla, please," begged Nick, as the thumping noise of the disco faded. "Sweetheart, tell me?" Camilla stopped at the door and drew him close to her. She kissed him deeply, and he felt like a drowning man gasping for air. Then she opened the door and stepped out into the chilly night. The crowd started chanting the countdown. "Here," she called. Nick shook his head miserably. How could he give her up? But maybe her wish had nothing to do with him. Maybe the force of their love would keep them together, prevent her from wishing anything destructive. Maybe she simply wanted to wish for a healthy life or success in her career or some shit like that. "To the left a bit," he muttered, and against his will he positioned her on the exact spot where New Year wishes came true. 7, 6, 5, Camilla declared loudly. "I wish to fall out of love with Nick, the man standing here beside me." Cheers erupted, and fireworks lit the sky. Nick covered his face with his hands, a sob escaping him. And so he didn't see the flash of steel until it was too late. Camilla burying the sharp point of the knife deep into his heart with a soft grunt of fury. The last words he heard was her whispering so viciously he could barely recognize her voice. "You asshole! Die, motherfucker! Burn in hell!" And then he slumped down on the cold street, his life blood spurting out, the sound of her heels fading away into the night.